manas for the mind, of course. And then the end piece, right? Because it's the same as, it's the same tra of tantra, for example, mantra, that it is a tool, right? Trai, or a technology or a tool that frees the mind from the mind. That's what we're aiming to do with it when we're using mantra in our practice, is that we're trying to free ourselves. I like that sense of, from the trajectory that the mind might be on. If we think about samskaras, that we fall into a groove, and so a mantra can pull you out of a certain way of thinking or a way of doing or being, and to disrupt the potential maybe negative energy that your mind might be getting trapped in.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to MYYT, where you are learning to level up your yoga teaching one masterful class at a time. I just made a huge career move and shift, the kind of career shift that actually makes you want to poop your pants. It has been a long time coming, and I know it's a good thing. I keep telling myself this is a good thing. You've been working towards this for a while, but you know that fear that comes with just making a bold move in general, but definitely that also comes with saying goodbye to something old so that you can do something new. It's just scary. It's scary letting go of that stability and comfort of what you've known and stepping into the unknown. So that's the space and place that I am currently in now. And unfortunately, I can't divulge into any of the details just yet. But I think that in a couple of weeks, probably at the beginning of next month, I'm going to give you all the juicy details in a solo episode. Keep your eyes peeled for that. At the same time, I'm still working on Inspired Flow Monthly, and this will be a subscription for yoga teachers. What I want to solve is that pervasive question of what am I going to teach in my next yoga class? That's what Inspired Flow Monthly will do for you. Once a month, at the beginning of the month, I'm going to slide in your email inbox with a complete class plan filled with sequences, with inspirational messages and playlists, so that all that you have to do is show up and teach. Coming very, very soon. This will be in the next couple of weeks. For the true story submission, we actually didn't have any this week. So what I want you to do right here and right now is stop whatever you're doing, head to the show notes and click on the link that says submit your true story. I know if you're listening and you're a yoga teacher that something has happened to you in the past, whether it was a funny story, an embarrassing moment, anything in between. I want to hear about it, and I'd love to feature you here on the podcast. It only takes about 3 minutes, so please, please do that now. In this episode, I had the privilege to sit down with my Sanskrit teacher, Claudette Evans. We had the best conversation about things like the power of sound and the vulnerability of using your voice, how your personal history influences your thoughts, beliefs, and identities, which affects how you show up in your teaching, Sanskrit's vibrational energy, and what's actually happening when we chant, the potency of mantras and how to use them for magic and manifestation. She explains Nada yoga, the yoga of sound, and its benefits, the struggles of learning Sanskrit, and the genius of using Yoga Sutra 1.12 as a learning model. We chat how learning Sanskrit influences the brain development, neuroplasticity, and adaptability. And make sure you stay all the way to the end for a chanting experience. She does a call and response of her favorite mantras lately, and it is beautiful. I personally find her energy so calming and soothing, and I know you will too. Let's dive in. Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time. Claudette Evans, ERYT 500 and YCAP, is passionate about the study and practice of yoga, as well as the training and mentoring of its teachers. As a yoga student and educator, Claudette fell in love with yoga philosophy. Already trained in Western classical voice, she was naturally drawn to the study of the Sanskrit language, Veda recitation, and eventually Indian classical voice. Her classes create a space for self-expression through body and voice, cultivating a clarity of focus and fostering the gift of embodiment. Through her teaching, she aims to create experiences of joy and healing that allow people to live well and feel good in their bodies, enabling them to authentically, bravely, and boldly do the things they want to do as they become exactly who they are meant to be. Claudette is grateful for the many teachers she studied with over the years, particularly her early Sanskrit education with Vyas Houston's American Sanskrit Institute, ASI, where she was a teacher for more than 10 years. Today, her main teachers are Shantala Sriramaya, Dr. Varun Khanna, and Dr. Douglas Brooks. Claudette shares the beauty of Sanskrit, yoga philosophy, and the Veda in weekly classes, workshops, and yoga teacher training programs throughout the Pacific Northwest and online. Welcome to the podcast, Claudette. I'm so happy to have you.
It's such a joy to be with you, Mackenzie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it has been. We were discussing before we even clicked record that it has been too long since I have been in some of your online classes, and my Sanskrit is definitely rusty. But all the same, it's a joy to have you. And I know that you're going to bring so much to the table as far as the beauty of vibration and sound.
I'm looking forward to talking with your students and your audience.
Yeah, so I guess a good place to start, kind of like you mentioned that you would like to discuss, is can you tell us a little bit about the power of voice and sound and how you use it in your teaching?
That's such a lovely question. So, as my bio articulates, I got interested in the sound of Sanskrit during my very first yoga teacher training program, my first 200-hour. We started studying mantra, and as in most yoga teacher training programs, we studied the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and worked to recite them, chant them. There's something about the power of sound and vibration that really spoke to me. I was already a classically trained singer, so coming into that program and now having this different way of using sound was really powerful and really special to me, because for me, I had a really difficult time sort of early on in my yoga journey of finding a sort of silent seated meditation practice that worked for me. But there was something about the use of mantra and sound and vibration that was really settling, that allowed me to focus, and that really took me into the practice and inward into myself in a way that a seated meditation practice did not, at least initially. Things have changed now. My practice has evolved over these 20 something years. Initially, sound was my way in. And what I've done as a teacher since becoming a teacher of both Sanskrit and mantra is bringing sound, even the simple practice of using Om at the beginning of a practice and at the end of a practice, but using that as a tool to help people settle their nervous systems, even when they don't know that that's what's happening in the moment. Like, I'm not necessarily articulating that, but we hum Om at the beginning of the practice, and then we evolve that further into that round Om and that more intoned Ah through, across the palate to that silence again. And there's something that's just very soothing and settling. It has always worked for me. I do try, because I recognize that not everybody is as in love with sound as I am, but I do let that be an invitational moment for folks at the beginning of the practice. And then when I'm closing my regular classes, I either close with Om or Om and a mantra of some kind, whatever I happen to be sort of obsessed with at the moment. So
Well, just having experienced some of your online courses, I believe, and you might have to correct me if I'm wrong, if your memory serves, but I think that I finished at least level 1, 2, 3. Do you have a 4? I feel like I was at
There,
one of your
I
first
think that you were in
students in
4. I
4.
was having that thought before getting on today, and I said,
Yes.
I think Mackenzie took level 4 as well. So
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yes, and I kept coming back because I had such a respect and admiration for your love and appreciation for it. And I think that that's something that makes a teacher stand out, is when they so clearly are enamored with something that it's contagious. And you had that effect on me. I was just like, she's
Mm.
such a perfect teacher for this because she loves it and it's very clear.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so thrilled and delighted that that came across. You never know how information lands when you're teaching whatever it is you're teaching. If I let myself, I can get too much in my head about, oh, are they liking it? Are they not liking it? And I try really hard not to do that anymore and just allow myself to have an experience and allow my students to have whatever experience it is that they're going to have. Interestingly enough, I had a student recently in a mantra session, embodying yoga through sound and vibration, who did not have fun, who did not enjoy the experience, and that was humbling. To be sure, but as I said, it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I don't have an expectation. For example, I don't have an expectation that my 200-hour teacher training students are going to become Sanskrit scholars or anything of the kind. Like, that's not an expectation that's realistic. And you really do have to be, I think, bitten by that bug, or have this connection to vibration. Like, it really does have to support you and serve your practice in order for you to adopt it and to want to dive deeper
Mhm.
into it and learn more about it. So you are a special breed, Mackenzie. Those of you that have studied, those that have studied Sanskrit with me are a kind of special breed of student.
Yes. Well, I have a somewhat similar background. I went to school for musical theater, of course. And so voice, I think people feel so exposed with the voice. And when you kind of mentioned that it's not everybody's cup of tea, or it can feel very vulnerable even for somebody to hear themselves make a sound. I think we're often afraid to be loud sometimes. I find it edgy what you're offering in a way. And that it does take a special type of person, but it even takes a special type of teacher to be able to present it and invite it to people in a way that, yes, is a little edgy, that, yes, is a little uncomfortable, but they feel safe enough to try and understand that it's not necessarily about how pretty it sounds or being a professional singer, but the effects that the voice and the vibration can have on the nervous system, like you spoke to, that they get to experience that. So I think it takes a special teacher, and you are that type of teacher, and I'm just so excited to have you.
Thank you for that. You're making me think of that entry into using the voice, like being deciding to study yoga to the depth of, I want to now teach this practice, I want to offer it and share it with others. Like, that takes a special kind of human being, I think, to do that
Mhm.
from the get-go. But then but then you're confronted with that vulnerability of bringing your voice into the space, and really trying to figure out, like, what is my voice?
Mhm.
How do I sound? How do I articulate these teachings? And how will I share them with others? And so part of, my process as a teacher and as a teacher trainer, is to sort of help kind of titrate that learning and that experience of using the voice and feeling comfortable using the voice in the yoga room by helping folks do a little bit of excavation of their past, starting with telling their yoga story, like writing it down, like what, going back as early in your life as you can remember, to like what are the sort of key moments or the stories that you have or that other people have about your voice, and just how the impact of that can affect your willingness, your confidence in
Mm.
using your voice in the room. And my vocal story is mostly a good one. I was really blessed with the ability to sing, and like you, I studied musical theater performance. You know, it was sort of destined that I would like at some point end up
Mm.
using my voice in that kind of a way. So I come in already with a kind of confidence in singing and chanting. And as I said, that special connection that I found with mantra and the use of vibration in yoga right from the get-go. But for others that were told, oh, your voice doesn't sound good, or you shouldn't sing, when everybody's singing, just mouth the words. Like, I've had conversations with folks that have had that experience, and those are powerful seeds that have been planted in someone's psyche. And so to have to move through that, to get over that in order to then feel like I can ohm in a room. Like, it doesn't have to be something as big as chanting the Gayatri mantra, but even just how do I sound when I ohm? That can be a process for folks to move through.
Yes, and I think you spoke to it so well that it even a phrase that comes from somebody is a seed, and it can take root and it can grow into this identity, and that identity or belief of the self makes you feel confident or not confident, which I think that that's such a powerful exercise that you do with your aspiring teachers or even current teachers, to realize just how much, of course, I mean, the Buddha talked about this, that a thought becomes a word becomes a deed becomes a habit, and then a habit hardens into character. Like, it all stems back to just these thoughts about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. It's so important.
Yeah.
I think that you have so much to offer. You kind of mentioned even with this exercise of realizing our own history and how that affects how we show up as teachers. But can you tell us a little bit about the history of Sanskrit and why it's so important to preserve it in the yoga spaces?
I have always said this to, my emerging teachers in teacher training, that again, I don't expect them to become Sanskrit scholars, but I think that it's essential that we have some knowledge, even if you choose not to use Sanskrit in your class. I will not be my heart will not be hardened because you didn't bring the Sanskrit names of postures into the room. There are things about, and this is true of really any language, there are things about the vibration of a Sanskrit word that are just different when translated into English, that it doesn't have the same energy or power or potential as the Sanskrit word does. And I think that we do ourselves, and I think we do our students a bit of a disservice when we choose not to. Choice. Everybody gets to choose, how they want to show up in the practice. For me, the study of Sanskrit history, it's a complex one because, like anything that involves time, war, change, migration, right? The people that are telling the story are the victors, and that is true of Sanskrit as well. So, Sanskrit emerges from Vedic Sanskrit, which emerges from a language that we call Proto-Indo-European. So it's in the same family tree as English and French and Spanish and German and a bunch of other languages, right? All of the Indic languages, they're all in that same Indo-European family, but it's pretty broad when you just think about like everything that's contained in there. And so, to the best of our knowledge, the story of Sanskrit actually begins in what I think today we call Turkey, Anatolia, that moved across, that these tribes traveled and moved west and southwest, and that those various tribes kind of split up and brought their Indo-European language And so we have English and we have French and we have Spanish and we have a bunch of other languages that all emerge from this kind of beginning place, as well as coming down to sort of North Africa and the Indian subcontinent, and then all of the languages that emerge out of Sanskrit that are the 20 something languages, official languages of India today. And what's fascinating about that is that that's one story that is told. But there's also the sort of Vedic mythology of language and the divine utterance of the goddess Vach. Vach, who is the goddess of speech, who basically her first utterance is what becomes the sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet. And so that unfolding is beautiful. We have like the idea of the alphabet, the aksharas, which are the indissolvable or indestructible sounds. That's what they are known as, the sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet, those phonemes. And then when we put them together, we get this lovely combination of now the name of something becomes the form of something. One of the things that I always try to share with my students is, you know, in yoga we talk about light a lot, and light is mentioned, and one of my favorite Sanskrit words is about light, like the quality of light, tejas, which is that brilliant kind of effulgence of light. Light was spoken into being, like even in the Bible, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. But the thing that emerged first wasn't the light; it was the sound, it was the vibration, and it was the power of speaking the thing into being. So Sanskrit and all of the stories about the language really speak to this idea that there is sound, there is vibration, and there's the power of that bringing things into the world.
Wow. Wow. I've never really thought of it that way. It makes me think of, I guess, your words and your voice being magic in the sense that you really are, in a way, kind of wielding spells, not to make it, a Harry Potter reference or anything. Is that kind of what we're doing when we chant? Is you really, your words and your voice has that much power to utter something and to bring something into form just by using your voice and creating sound? Is that what's actually happening?
I love that. I love that idea. One of the ways that my teacher Shantala describes it is that, like, what we're doing when we chant mantra is that we're really trying to recreate the experience of the rishi that first heard that mantra. So as you know, I am sitting here and I have my pages and pages, binders and binders of mantras and suktams and all the things that I'm studying with her just here. That when I sit down, that I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of the rishi to recreate the experience of the sound as they first heard it, as it was first received. So to my mind, that's where my mind goes. That yes, that mantras are these powerful formulas that have this potency and potential embedded within them. And so yeah, to a degree, you can sort of think of it as we are wielding that kind of power, a kind of power that in essence we're trying to recreate the experience of that first rishi, that sage that first received, heard that mantra and spoke it into being.
Wow, I love that. Do you spend hours agonizing over yoga sequences, desperately seeking inspiration to keep your classes fresh and engaging? You're not alone. Designing dynamic flows to cater to different abilities and goals can be a time consuming challenge for even the most seasoned yoga teachers. The Pose Bible is here to save the day. It's your roadmap to effortless sequence creation. This comprehensive resource is a goldmine of yoga poses, categorized by breadth, family, difficulty, benefits, and so much more. This will help you spend less time planning and more time teaching. Impress your students with diverse and creative sequences. Feel confident knowing you're offering a well rounded yoga experience for all. Always feel prepared with 10 done for you sequences. Get your copy today for only $13 and transform your yoga teaching. This includes downloadable 85-page PDF valued at $97, 10 done for you flows valued at $27, everything you need to stop stressing and start sequencing. Value priceless. Stop wasting precious time on sequence creation. Get the Pose Bible today for only $13 and reclaim your energy for what matters most, inspiring your students. The link is in the show notes. I think I saw one time, you probably know much more on the topic of mantra, but the two Sanskrit words that even comprise the word mantra, man for mind and tra to break, is one kind of way to translate, I guess, the word mantra. And I thought that that was a beautiful description and a different way to look at what mantra does, is that it can help. It's hard to stop the mind in its tracks, but if you kind of break the trajectory that the mind is going and give it a different, almost like a railroad track, if you just split the track, because it's got all this momentum, right? It's really hard to just stop the train in its track. But if you break the track and split it, and it just follows a different track, that it ends up in a different destination, of course, because it's going a different direction. And so that's one way that that I've thought of mantra before, is what it can do for you,
Yeah.
and sound. What do you think of that, or have you ever heard that?
I like that. I think that's it's very close to the translation that I first learned. Manas for the mind, of course, and then the end piece, right? Because it's the same tra of tantra, for
Mm.
example, mantra. That it is a tool, right? Trai, or a technology or a tool that frees the mind from the mind.
Yeah.
That's what we're aiming to do with it when we're using mantra in our practice, is that we're trying to free ourselves. I like that sense of from the trajectory that the mind might be on. If we think about samskaras, that we fall into a groove, and so a mantra can pull you out of a certain way of thinking or a way of doing or being, and to disrupt the potential maybe negative energy that your mind might be getting trapped in.
Amazing and so necessary. And I like that you mentioned that for somebody who found it really difficult to kind of sit down and quiet the mind using the mind, that mantra and sound can be almost like this side door, a back door, into a place that leads you to the same destination. It's just using a different method to kind of get there, which I think that's why there's so many styles of yoga, because it depends on kind of what you're bringing to the table,
Yeah.
and your natural propensities and your natural inclinations and talents. That's going to be the best way for you to go.
Yeah, so good. The that nada yoga, which is the yoga of sound and vibration, uses those long sustained holds of um, either the Sanskrit phonemes of the alphabet or the sound om, as that way in, that we can use that in sort of a similar way to calm the mind, and to bring ourselves to a kind of stillness and ease that maybe we can't access when doing sort of, I'm going to put in air quotes, a traditional seated meditation practice. It was, for me, it was my saving grace during the pandemic, because my head was so busy, especially at the beginning, that I couldn't access that stillness and that kind of inner steadiness and quiet with my, traditional seated practice, that I needed chanting and mantra to bring me back to a place of ease and focus and calm. It was very different, but I was so grateful to have had that practice.
Yes, and that's why I kind of wanted to have you on the podcast, because I find for myself, and I bet other yoga teachers and other yoga practitioners can relate, that sometimes outside of asana, it's hard to find other ways to practice. And so finding you was such a gift, because I feel like not many people offer what you're doing, and then aren't maybe necessarily equipped with a really brilliant way to teach it in a way that's going to be effective. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about your courses and really the learning model of ASI. So can you kind of walk us through how your courses kind of work, or how you teach Sanskrit and mantra and sound?
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit already about um, the challenge that folks can encounter when studying something that uses their voice, that requires them to use their voice, like Sanskrit or mantra. And one of the things, and this is the genius of Vyas Houston from the American Sanskrit Institute, um, one of the things that I still hold to is the power of the learning model that we use for the American Sanskrit Institute, that I have adapted and introduced, even in a small way, to whichever student community I happen to be working with. If I have 2 hours with them, or 3 hours with them, or an entire 9-month teacher training with them, I try to bring us back to Sutra 112, and the idea of using those qualities of practice and non-attachment to help keep us steady and in the moment. So by committing to coming back to the practice again and again, and noticing that distraction is going to happen, inner disturbances are going to happen, external disturbances are going to happen as we practice, and we can consciously choose to attach ourselves to that distraction, to get hooked, and that will pull us out of the moment, it'll pull us out of the practice. Or we can consciously choose to notice the distraction is there and consciously choose to not let ourselves get attached to it. So that practice of non-attachment, or vairagya, to use the Sanskrit term, and abhyasa, to bring ourselves back into practice or sustained effort or attention, can be very, very steadying for our nervous system. And the sort of genius of that learning model that Vyas created is that we're all committing to it. I'm committing to it as the teacher, and everybody in the room, all of the students, have also agreed that we will use this practice, that we will notice that we will be destabilized, our nervous system will be disrupted, because we're human, and that's just the way it works. And especially when we're learning something new, um, uh, that's going to happen. So let's have some compassion for ourselves. Let's offer ourselves some compassion and tools to create ease and steadiness, so that we can come back to the practice together.
Mm. And I think that learning model probably could be applied to all things and should be applied to all things.
Probably. It's so useful. And in fact, I think that Vyas did some writing, and has shared numerous times, I think, on the ASI website, um, just wonderful feedback from students from all walks of life that were introduced to the learning model. We're like, oh my gosh, this is life changing. I'm bringing it into my meetings. I'm bringing it into my teaching over here. I'm
Right.
using it in this way. So yes, that it's powerful. And he learned it or created it out of necessity, because he was seeing sort of writ large in front of him students that were struggling and constantly interrupting or disrupting the sort of teaching practice that he was conducting, and needed to create a tool so that he and everybody um, in that room could come back to a place of stability. So it's brilliant, and just inspired that it came out of the Yoga Sutras, which are a constant support, I think, for anyone going through a yoga teacher training program. I think most of
Mhm.
us, if not everybody, has studied the sutras in some way.
Yes, it definitely stuck out to me in the experience that it laid the foundation for successful learning and created a really beautiful environment. That's almost like, I guess, the yamas and niyamas in a way of like codes of conduct of like, as long as we kind of maintain these parameters, that it's going to keep, they almost are like the edge of a wheel and it
Mm-hmm,
keeps
mm-hmm.
us rolling. It keeps us like moving forward,
Yeah.
while still acknowledging that there will be distractions, there will be obstacles and roadblocks along the way. So I definitely remembered that stuck out to me in the experience, and I still remember it because you spend a generous amount of time on it in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a
Yeah.
good, 2 hours or so that we introduce that learning model. I don't know that I spend quite as much time on it these days, but it is, I think, useful um, to just address the feeling. Like the way that we do it is so interesting. The first time I was introduced to it was my first time taking a Sanskrit immersion with ASI, and I can't even remember if I showed up late for this weekend or maybe it was on time on the first day and then announced that I would be late on the second day because I had to teach. And then I had to shift my schedule around in order to get there on time, because that's one of the agreements in the, it's one of our agreements is that, we will learn together, and we'll do our best to not move on with without folks being present. And gosh, what an interesting and again unsettling experience it was to hear those sounds. And I think as a singer, I came in going, oh, I can make these sounds, and I think that I was fine for the most part, but that didn't disrupt the nervousness that I felt about like, oh, I'm in this room with a bunch of strangers, and now I'm going to try and recall this like long phrase of weird sounds that I have no reference to, um,
Mhm.
back to these folks. Yeah, it's quite an unsettling, and it is meant to be. It's meant to be destabilizing, like
Yeah.
so that we can create the conditions that will arise in the practice of learning and studying.
Yeah, I think you're using the word unsettling, and even with the kind of samskara um, reference, that is that really kind of the genius of even just making the sounds of how it correlates and responds to the brain. I know you have a lot to talk about on the language of brain, the language of the brain, and how this practice can almost repattern the brain to think in different ways. Um, just setting these kind of codes, how we're going to learn, creates the proper environment for that to happen. But what is that thing that happens inside the brain?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things, of course, that is happening, like there's a million things that are happening when, we introduce those sounds, and they are, the masculine noun endings that, folks have likely never heard, or at least not, maybe they've heard them, but they haven't zeroed in on them, and hearing them all together, expressed as sort of a delightful melody for folks to learn. Is again meant to be destabilizing. It's meant to kind of take us out of our comfort zone. It's kind of a shortcut, I guess, to getting us to a place of like shared experience and understanding, so that we can then get to so how do we address all of these things that we've already articulated here, are likely to happen during this learning experience. The brain is amazing and powerful and so adaptive, and one of the things that happens when we're studying anything, but in particular, I think when we're studying a language, is that we are forming these new neural pathways, and we are, I think, as we are delving into the practice itself, and this is one of the keys. I think you were speaking to this earlier, is that when we're away from it for a time, it seems like we've lost this thing, but it's really there, that we've created a samskara, to use yogic language. We've created a new groove, or we've created that neural pathway, that new connection. And even if it feels like we've forgotten it in the moment, we've actually laid this really beautiful foundation to come back to. So even if and I say this to my students all the time, even if you go away from Sanskrit, for a time, when you come back to it, it's not like you're starting from zero again. You're starting from the place where you were before, and you will move even quicker into whatever it is that you're learning, as long as you can maintain that sort of commitment to consistency, and coming back again and again, which is, I think, true of any other language that you might be studying or might choose to study. One of the things that we know about Sanskrit is that because it is a language of patterns and even sort of coding, that it's a great language to study, or subject to study, alongside folks that are doing studies in mathematics, or other sciences, and music, because it is about pattern making. And there's something really beautiful about just sort of seeing the language kind of unfold, even if you think that you're not good at it, that it is supporting you in these other areas of your life. Yeah, it's just making you more powerful as a result.
It makes me think of that phrase, like learning, or like riding a bike. It comes back like riding a bike.
Yeah.
That
That's nice.
once you've learned it, it's somewhere in there. And I really definitely did not expect the training to be what it was. I think I walked in with a different expectation, but I was pleasantly surprised with what it was. I didn't know that we would study the Devanagari characters in such detail to recognize the characters themselves, and then associate with them the individual sounds, so that by the end of some of your trainings, you're able to read Devanagari. I had no idea that that's what I was getting myself into. And then secondly, I didn't realize that it was so mathematical, and that there was a whole sutras written on just the grammatical grammar rules.
Yes, that almost 4,000 sutras written by another sage, Panini, not Panini, but Panini. looks the same, but sounds different. Panini, who also has kind of a sort of magical, story. There is fact, and then there's mythology around both Patanjali and Panini. Panini was apparently in his class of students, like not the best student. And his teachers didn't really invest time in him. There was another student that was like the star of the class, and other students that were ahead. And he got to a place of sort of depression and sadness and frustration, um, just with the progress that he was or wasn't making in his studies. And so he took a long walk and sat down and basically asked for help. And so the story goes that what he heard in his request was Shiva and the Maheshwara Sutrani. So I don't remember if you I don't know if you remember this from level 2, but the Ayun Rilruk Ayong Ayouch Hayaravat Lung and etc. That whole thing is what he heard, what he received. And then he came back to school and wrote these rules, and suddenly he was the star of the class, and his teachers were like, where did that come from? And then the one student that was supposed to be the star wrote a commentary on Panini's sutras on Sanskrit grammar and said, well, you missed this rule and then you missed that rule over there, but didn't negate any of the rules that he had articulated. So he's just like, well, this one is missing and that one I think is missing, or you could have said this maybe this way and that would have been clearer, but otherwise didn't really have a whole lot more to add. And in this moment, I'm totally forgetting that other scholar's name, but also Patanjali, or some version of Patanjali, is said to have also written a commentary on Panini's sutras that um, that and maybe actually that Patanjali was the first to actually articulate the Maheshwara Sutrani and name it that, but that sutra is what Panini based those 4,000-ish rules of Sanskrit grammar on, that thing that he heard and received. So true. So true. Well, English is complex enough. I always joke about the English language. Um, there is a there are a number of really brilliant scholars and linguists out there in the world that write about English. But one of my favorite sayings comes from John McWhorter. Um, and he said he calls English a language that's always on the move, and describes English as being promiscuous because it's borrowed from so many other languages, and the meanings of words in English are always changing, right? You wait, a generation or so, and the way that we're using a particular word today is likely to be different. Hence, whereas Sanskrit is very different. There's a stability, and this is one of those things that we can thank Panini for, is that it's so stable, that it has a stira to it because of those thousands of rules of grammar that kind of fixed the language. Some say in amber, in kind of a not nice way, which is the reason that it gets sort of the moniker of being a dead language, that idea. But when yoga teachers are using it, and other scholars are using it, I don't know that we can call it dead in that
Mm.
same way.
Yeah, and I think you do such a beautiful job of keeping it alive and helping us all have our have our understanding of the power of it and better pronunciation. So I'm glad that you opened your mouth and let your voice ring and sing. I was thinking that we could maybe close with some chant that's on your heart or anything to hear your beautiful voice. I would really love that.
Yeah, I want to think about what am I chanting? Hold on. I'm going to grab a binder and I'll share something I'm chanting in
And if
class with my
yeah,
teacher.
yeah, if you want to make it to where the listeners could maybe repeat after you, or if you choose something else that's not appropriate or too advanced, that's also fine too.
Well, how about I'll do it. I'll do it in reverse order. I'll chant the thing, and then I'll chant something that we can chant together. So,
Okay.
how about
Yeah,
that?
sounds good.
Okay, so this is um, the Shraddha Suktam. Shraddha is a Sanskrit word that has many meanings, but we usually translate it to mean faith. This is just such a sweet. It's such a sweet suktam. It's short, so it won't take me too long to get through. But I remember that when I was learning it, that my teacher talked about it as though it was really essentially the first element that we needed to come to our studies of the Veda, of Sanskrit, that um, that faith is, and this is a translation from Douglas. Douglas describes faith as where you place your heart, right? So that we're putting our hearts into this practice and into the power and vibration of these aksharas. So here we go. Om Shraddhayagnissamidyate Shraddhaya Vindate Havihi Shraddham Bhagasya Murdhani Vachasa Vedayamasi Priyaggu Shraddhe Dadataha Priyaggu Shraddhe Didasataha Priyam Bhojeshu Yajvasu Idamma Uditam Kridhi Yatha Deva Asureshu Shraddha Mugreshu Chakrere Evam Bhojeshu Yajvasu Asmaka Muditam Kridhi Shraddhan Deva Yajamanaha Vayugopa Upasate Shraddhagum Hridayayaku Utya Shraddhaya Huyate Havihi Shraddham Pratarhavamahe Shraddham Madhyandinam Pari Shraddhagum Suryasya Nimruchi Shraddhe Shraddha Payehama Shraddha Devanadhivaste Shraddha Vishvamidan Jagat Shraddhang Kamasya Mataram Havisha Vardhayamasi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Beautiful, Claudette. Oh, I forgot how listening to it, and then I remember now sitting there and repeating back to you how much it makes me want to sway. Like in my
Me
body, I
too.
want to sway. I forgot that.
Yeah. Um, so why don't we chant? We'll do call and response. The Shanti mantra, the Sahana Vavatu, which is the student and teacher chant, which it's my mission to teach everyone, and I hope that all my students will learn it. And what's lovely about it is that there isn't a deity attached to it, so We don't get into sort of the messiness of, oh, am I appropriating from this culture? This is just kind of the sweetness of the student and the teacher, both seeking the support of the divine together, asking that our work together be inspired, and that our learning be blessed, that there be no hatred between us, and that we come to know peace. So we'll do a call and response. Om Sahana Vavatu. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryang Karavavahai. Sahaviryang Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma vidvishavahai. Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Beautiful. I can't wait to listen back to the recording so I can repeat after you. I didn't want to pollute the recording with my attempts while everyone else is trying to. Oh, Claudette, this was such a joy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Can you tell all the listeners how to find you, how to plug into all of your amazing offers?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, I am at Claudette_yoga. And you can always find me on my website, ClaudetteEvansYoga.com.
Great. If you received any takeaways, any downloads or insights in this episode, we would so appreciate if you would take a screenshot, upload it to Instagram, and tag both of us. Me, Mackenzie, I'm Master Your Yoga Teaching. And as Claudette said, she is at Claudette_yoga. Let us know what resonated with you, what you learned. Thank you to all the listeners out there. Thank you to Claudette for being here.
Thanks for having me. A delight.
Yes. And until next week, namaste, blessed. Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag at Master Your Yoga Teaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste, blessed. Are you feeling stuck? If so, this is your exclusive invite to Vortex Yoga Retreat in Sedona, Arizona, this October 11th through 14th, 2024. Sedona's breathtaking red rocks transform into a fiery masterpiece in the autumn. Imagine practicing yoga amidst this stunning backdrop, feeling the ancient vortexes amplify your intentions and awaken your spirit. This retreat is for you if You crave a deeper connection with your energetic body, the chakras. You're ready to align your life with purpose and passion. Or you seek a transformational experience to unleash your inner power. Here's what awaits you: 4 days and 3 nights nestled in Sedona's beauty, daily yoga and meditation, delicious local dinners, sound healing, hiking to infamous Sedona vortexes, connection with like-minded souls on this empowering journey, learn chakra balancing principles and practices, and a special gift from your hosts. Don't wait. Space is extremely limited and spots are going fast. Visit rachakaretreats.com/Sedona to book your spot and choose your accommodations, or click the link in the show notes. Use code MYYT for 10% off. Are you ready to balance your energy and align your life?